Welcome to episode four. I think it's episode four anyway. I've done a few now of the Arsenal Women podcast. I'm Freddie Cardi. Alongside me, as always, is Daisy Goodhand. We're both representing various international teams. You've been cheering on the Lionesses, Daisy and Alessia Russo. I've just got my Austria kit on, and I can make out that I'm cheering on, obviously, Wienroither and Zinsberger. We're going to have a full international roundup. We've had everything really in this international break. If we got time later on in the episode, we'll talk about my sort of Arsenal women's season review, which I wrote a couple of days ago. But let's start, Daisy, with the Lionesses. You were there on Friday. I mean, we've got to talk about the defeat before we talk about the win. You were there at St James's Park. How was it?
Oh, it was brilliant. I think when you go to a stadium like that, like it's always going to be a great time. I love going to the Lionesses. I try and get to as many as I can, especially if they're up north and they're local to where I am. But yeah, in terms of the first game, obviously at St James's, I don't think anyone would have looked at the lineup originally and thought that there was much of an issue. We kind of went into it quite optimistically. I think from the very offset though of the first game, there was a sense of we haven't seen this, especially the back line, we haven't really seen them play a lot together. We had that Bright and Williamson partnership that we'd seen back in the Euros, but both coming obviously back from injury and trying to adjust to playing back in that England side. And I think we could tell in general there was a lot of nerve and a lot of, early mistakes. The passing wasn't the best. Obviously, we got the Mary Earps injury straight away, which kind of maybe rocked us a little bit. But yeah, in terms of the actual performance, I thought these are two very good teams with very great attacking style play, and I think it could have gone either way. I just think when you're playing that kind of football, sloppiness really comes into it, doesn't it? And you make a slight mistake, and it becomes almost so obvious that one team is either going to be at their best, playing passes, breaking through the lines, and the other, like we did, looked quite shaky in that first game.
Before we come on to the second, Beth Mead scoring and a well taken goal. That must have been a big cheer, certainly for you and any other Gooners in the crowd.
Yeah, definitely. We made ourselves heard from the top, obviously supporting the Arsenal girls. I thought at the start potentially it took a little while for certain players like me to settle into the game, but I thought with the way that we were playing, playing it out wide and trying to pull it back and exposing France, in that manner, we did extremely well to create those chances. Obviously, we had that first one that Toon put wide, but I think Mead does strive, doesn't she, in those situations? We've seen that a bit for Arsenal this season when we pull the ball back in the box. She kind of tends to be in the right place to finish those first or second balls. I think that maybe like having her sort of playing sort of a more central position and being in the box for those situations definitely helped Arsenal, and it definitely helped the Lionesses in that game too. And yeah, after that we kind of grew into the game, and I think Mead grew into the game as well.
No changes last night, which was well, obviously apart from Hannah Hampton coming in for Mary Earps, who went off injured early on in the first game. That raised some eyebrows. I think we'll probably come on to the scheduling, how we've got international windows for the women's teams in June and July after such a busy season. Obviously, Arsenal have that extra game going over to Australia, which only put really more, stress and onus on the players. Unchanged last night, and as we talked about off air, it was either going to be a tremendous success or a real failure. She took a gamble, didn't she, Serena Wiegman, and it just about paid off. What changed last night?
Yeah, and I think when it was looking at what I was originally saying in terms of I think when two teams play in that style, it can go either way, and I think that's potentially how Serena saw that. And the interview that Georgia Stanway did after as well, she mentioned that too. It's kind of that when you get it right and when you build those relationships and you're in the right place and the things that went wrong you tweak. We knew that that was going to be a success, and we really caught France out in that sense. I can imagine they too weren't prepared after our performance in the first game to see the same lineup. But I think having that consistency and actually Serena saying, well, I'm going to stick to this team and I'm going to show you basically what we could do right. I think that she really proved that by playing that same starting 11. I think maybe the one criticism that fans and people like you and me were thinking was the substitutions. And obviously, with, like you're saying, a busy schedule, going straight into international window, making only three substitutions across both games. I can't remember exactly, but and also the same substitutions and not seeing certain players get a chance. I think that's where maybe the frustration set in a little bit.
And I know we're obviously moving away from Arsenal. We will come on to Russo, but you look at England sort of compared to other teams, the depth is there. When you watch the WSL every week, even a couple of players now playing abroad as well at some of the top European clubs, it's not like England have no one to call upon on the subs bench, is it? Is it just a little element of stubbornness, if you like, from Serena Wiegman? Because the players are there. There's so much talent on the bench.
Yeah, and I know there's been a lot of like mixed opinions about her reasonings for that, and obviously she probably, reads the frustration and hears that, the fan input. But I think the real frustration is the players that have proved themselves for club this season and haven't been given the opportunity. We sometimes worry that she's stuck playing that Euro squad and certain players more than others. I think if we look at Aggie Beaver-Jones, Grace Clinton, Jess Naz, Alex Greenwood, all had really, really good seasons for their club. And it's more just the fact of actually they could be given a chance to prove themselves and they could be given a chance even to change the game. So it depends obviously where she sees that. She obviously believes in a game plan, brought on the right players, brought on Chloe Kelly, Fran Kirby, and that was potentially always in the plan, and we don't know that. But it's just more a case of you want them to impress, don't you? Because you want them to do well for their country and have that opportunity. And this is a chance for them to get into the senior squad. And obviously we didn't have players like Lauren James as well, and we have to adapt to not having key players in that squad. So it should have opened up an opportunity for the younger players to get a chance.
It's almost a more competitive international window, though, isn't it? There's such a tough
Yeah.
group that England are into, and usually, European qualifiers, we've seen England put, 20 goals past teams in the past, and obviously at that point you can make so many changes. If you've got a friendly, you can make unlimited changes, but now every game is almost a cup final for England. They want to go through
Yeah.
to the Euros as quickly as they can, and that's probably put more pressure on the squad to perform. Alessia Russo scoring the goal. Arsenal's Leah Williamson give a penalty away, but we can maybe skirt around that. And talk about Alessia Russo. It was a good header, really well placed, and another opportunity almost for her to show the wider women's football community just how rounded a player she is. She does so much off the ball up front. We see that every week with Arsenal. She doesn't always get the recognition though of the Lionesses. I think she really did last night.
Yeah, and I have seen obviously in that after that first game there was sort of mixed bag opinions on. We've always been aware of the role, especially watching Arsenal week in week out that Russo plays. I'm a massive defender of that kind of style, having that involvement in midfield and in the build-up play and using her strengths to our advantage. I know in the past, especially in recent times, we've obviously had different kind of strikers for England. Obviously, people talk about Ellen White. She was extremely clinical. She was always in the box. She scored the goals. You knew what you got from her. And when we're seeing a different style, and Serena clearly sees that too, and she's obviously used Russo in that way to get that advantage. And yeah, in the second game, I think that really demonstrated actually because people were seeing it a little bit more. They were seeing her hold up the ball. They were seeing her, come up against don't forget, some of the top defenders in Wendy Renard, like, and that in that back line and take them on and not be afraid. And yeah, maybe in the first game because we didn't get that win, the frustration was stronger than it was in the second game because we did get that win. And she obviously scored a fantastic header, which we've started to see her do a lot more as well. And I really like that. I think people forget obviously that game in Australia, the friendly, she got the header and then again she's starting to really bring that into a game and obviously that's a ma major positive for playing for Arsenal and for England.
Yeah, really interesting. She has really worked on that Arsenal, trying to push her into the box a little bit more, but also you don't want to lose the amount of work she can do off the ball. And, with England, when they have so many versatile attacking players, they are able to accommodate Russo dropping deeper and pulling defenders out of position. And yeah, she was excellent last night. We have, as I said, a real mixed bag of games to go across. I think we'll try and rank almost the news, the top most important news, and it's not necessarily good news first. Victoria Pelova started for the Netherlands, played all 90 minutes in their 1-0 win over Finland. She was subbed off injured after 12 minutes in the next game, just 12 minutes in, and a nasty collision by the looks of it against Emikoi Visto of Finland. And interestingly, Andreas Jonker, he didn't cover up at all that look whenever he sees a player go down, especially in the women's game. And when the knee is involved, that there's always the possibility of an ACL injury. He said that's one of the downsides of being a manager for a women's team. You're confronted with the ACL very quickly. When they go down holding their knee, every time you think it can't be true. They're going to examine her, but the doctor said we have to examine it properly. And when that said, I pay attention. So obviously we don't want to be fearing the worst, but it's quite the stark reality, isn't it, when the head coach just comes out and says straight away, we've got to be prepared for this eventuality that it could be an ACL.
Yeah, and I think we're all sort of in the same situation, aren't we? Especially when we either watch a player go down or hear about an injury. I mean, even if you think about Mary Earps, before people knew it was a hip injury, everybody jumped to that conclusion, and that's just because of the vast amount of ACL injuries that we've had and that lack of understanding and research about that specific injury. Obviously, we touched on it a little while at the start of this podcast, but it's the demand and the intensity of playing so much football, and obviously we know that the women's game that is a major issue that we need to address. And how can we make this schedule work? I mean, a player like I mean any player, it doesn't matter who, you don't want to see that happening, and you don't want to have that anxiety, especially for the player, for the team, for everybody, as soon as they go down. And I think we really need to address that sort of problem that we've got, and it doesn't seem to be getting any better, does it? As you know, as the game's going on and we're playing more and more games, and when is something going to change is the question that I know a lot of us are asking at this point.
Yeah, I think whatever the injury is, she's going to have to play two more games for the Netherlands next month. It's just a relentless schedule. International break in two international breaks in what should be a time where players are off on holiday is just seems crazy. There is really no rest for them. Two more Arsenal players went off injured. Caitlin Ford in Australia's first game against China. That appeared to be more precautionary. She was able to walk off the pitch fairly unaided. She didn't start the second game. No Arsenal players started the first one. But Catley and Cooney Cross did start the second game, a 1-1 draw the first one, then a 2-0 win. Catley with a nice free kick assist, actually, which was quite good to see considering we talked about set pieces last week. It was nice to see Catley and Cooney Cross standing over it and Catley delivering the ball in. And no surprise, Daisy, to see that all three of the Arsenal players are in Australia's Olympic squad.
Yeah, really excited for obviously for the Olympics. Obviously, yeah, maybe we could touch a little bit on obviously playing the Olympics and the demand and not really getting a proper rest, especially with these games being played as well. But in terms of the positives, yeah, in terms of set pieces, we have obviously talked a lot, haven't we, about finishing set pieces. We touched a little bit on how we can deliver those set pieces. I think Catley's always been one that we've considered as that being one of her strengths. I think we could definitely touch on Cooney Cross more, couldn't we, next season? What can she bring, taking free kicks, delivering free kicks into the box? We'll look at that a little bit more. And I know there's been a lot of discussion about players potentially coming off and sort of actually putting their hands up and saying, I need to come off here because because I'm tired and I need a rest. And that can't be happening, can it, at this point in the game? We can't have players coming off injured or potentially actually are injured because of the demand of playing, and actually saying, well, I know some people touched on Katie McCabe's yellow card as well, and maybe potentially are these players actually looking to just have a rest at times? And we really shouldn't be having that at this level in the women's game. We shouldn't have to, players have to come off and say, actually, I'm calling it here because I need a rest.
Yeah, it was interesting just, casting my eye across just how much football these Arsenal players have played. And a lot of them will be, often play every minute for their national teams. They're some of the key players, as you'd expect. But mostly it's been substitute appearances or playing first halves, playing 20 minutes here, there, and everywhere. And it's not really been a real brilliant international break, I think, for these Arsenal players. Obviously, for the Lionesses, they've all featured heavily under Serena Wiegman, but elsewhere, there's not been a lot of football played, and it's been quite concerning. And I think it's probably not just for Arsenal who have had their long season, but obviously they didn't play Champions League football, so they've been a bit light on that front. The end of the season was quite nicely scheduled for them, but then obviously they went over to Australia. Now that's obviously helpful for Caitlin Ford, Catley and Cooney Cross, because that puts them where they need to be. But for the likes of Pelova, who then have to go all the way back across and then play a game. Look at Russo, she's just never going to get a rest at the moment. And we'll continue with Laia Kadina, another one who went off injured, 56 minutes in against Denmark. She did travel to the next game and she was an unused substitute. Mariona Caldente, who's close, we're told, to move to Arsenal, scored a penalty in the first game. Missed one in the second game after Katrina Kuhl gave it away. And one story that I was able to put together was Cadena asked if she would welcome a move for Caldente. Of course, she said. I mean, that basically sums it up, doesn't it? And I'm sure she's been having a few chats in the hotel, in the restaurants, in the walk before games. I'm sure those two have been getting together and talking about Arsenal.
Yeah, the excitement is growing, isn't it, amongst like the community, the fans, on social media. And obviously, yeah, I think when you have a reaction like that from Kadena, you kind of look at that and think, okay, it must already be done, because players don't usually speak out, do they, unless things have been confirmed. I think we thought, it's only going to be a matter of days, if not next week or very, very soon that we hear that announcement. Obviously, yeah, I mean, we talked a little bit, didn't we, about what Caldente can bring individually, but these relationships that she has with players like Kadena are definitely going to help her settle in at Arsenal. And obviously, when you play with players at international level, you have that level of I know somebody and I'm comfortable and I can really integrate into this squad. We obviously want Mariona to get into the squad and feel settled as soon as possible. So yeah, it's a really exciting news at this point. And it's just really nice watching players like that play at in these international fixtures as well, because we get to see kind of what we're getting. Um, if she does join Arsenal, if and when. But yeah, really, really excited. Obviously for that news to come through, and yeah, just a matter of time, I think.
Always a bonus because when players do sort of club press conferences, they're often very restricted in what they can say. But when they go away for the country, sometimes a few more stories open up. And once you can Google translate a few quotes, you suddenly start finding out a bit more information. Kadena was certainly helpful with that. Let's touch on Katie McCabe then. Ireland bottom of the group, Euro qualification looking difficult for them at the moment. Obviously, Captain McCabe played in a 3-0 and 1-0 defeat to Sweden, who had no Arsenal players out of the three available. Obviously, Hurtig, Blackstenius, and Ilestedt all unavailable. McCabe booked a cynical yellow card, suspended for the England game, which is a massive loss for Ireland, but not looking great for them at the moment, unfortunately. They are just in such a tough group.
Yeah, and I think that's what it is, isn't it? Obviously, the qualification to the World Cup was absolutely massive for them, but they've been drawn into this group. Even England are looking at this group and thinking, how are
Yeah.
we going to get out? So you can kind of understand where Ireland are coming from at this point, and can you really blame them? I don't think necessarily it's a case of the Ireland fans are frustrated at not qualifying and not like getting all the points in every game. I think it's the performance, isn't it? The level of performance, and that's kind of what you've got to look at this point. And I think there's been some frustration about potentially not taking chances, not creating chances. And obviously when you're a team like Ireland, your big game players like McCabe, especially in a game against England where you just want to put in a performance. I think if we look at that last game, they definitely did that at times, and they definitely put England under pressure, and they dealt with the threats that we posed at times. And towards the end of the game, we started to get a little bit nervous as England fans. So I think not having her is a major hit, and obviously the way that she sort of conceded, like she sort of gave away that foul, people may be a little bit upset because did she need to at that point? Especially since I know a lot of people who watched it said there were
Hmm.
players in behind her that could have covered for her. So potentially Ireland fans a little bit frustrated in that. And obviously I'm going over to the game as well. So as an Arsenal fan, I'm
Oh,
thinking,
brilliant.
oh, I've missed out on seeing one of
Yeah.
our players. But yeah, potentially could have not given that away and sort of looked at that and thought actually the next game means more, and we really could have done with, having McCabe for that game.
Is there too much pressure on her, do you think? It's normal as the captain of an international team, isn't it? But do you think she is held in such high esteem? And maybe she almost doesn't want to. I'm sure she'll love being the leader, but she's by no means the golden child of Irish football, is she? We all know what she's like for club and country. Do you think she's almost held too high? There's too much pressure on her. It's almost like Ireland are almost accepting that it's going to be so much more of a challenge just to lose Katie McCabe, but that's obviously a compliment to her too.
Yeah, you can take that both ways, and she probably does. I mean, she probably, we've had her take captaincy in general. We know what kind of player she is. She does perform, she is a top player, and there is pressure on individuals when it's placed on them and people, those who sort of see it as she's their only chance. Potentially that's where that pressure comes from. And if we look at other players that Ireland have got, there's definitely individuals that can step up, that can perform. And it's not just a case of we only know Katie McCabe. There are other players in that squad that have performed at club level and definitely can bring something to that team. So maybe it's about you're right, maybe taking that pressure off might help her. We don't know if it's potentially she's just mentally and physically exhausted from playing so much football. We don't know if it's just a case of that's the kind of player that she is. She puts everything into these games. She's not going to be the first to shy away from a tackle, is she? No matter the circumstances or the repercussions. So, yeah, we know what we're getting with McCabe, and it's just upsetting that she doesn't get to play in that game for Ireland especially, but there are other players that can step up, and obviously for people who are going to watch that as an Arsenal fan and obviously wanted to get to see Katie McCabe, playing and doing well.
It's good news for the Lionesses, I'm sure.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Mainly for tackles as well, isn't it? We don't want any more injuries, Katie.
Yeah, she'll be screaming on from the stands, I'd imagine. We'll finish up with the
Yeah.
European qualifiers before we come to Canada. And the USA, the team on my shirt this morning. Austria had the nice return of Laura Wienroither coming on with 8 minutes to go in their 1-1 draw of Iceland. She played the second half in the next game. And also Frida Maanum making her return for Norway for the first time since the Conti Cup final. And she equalised with a header against Italy last night. Crucial, crucial goal, actually, drawing in the end. And that takes them to second in the group, which is good news for a Norway side that struggled in recent years, but really good to see. I think Wienroither was, in particular, and Maanum felt like a real weight off their shoulders coming back on, and great to see Maanum scoring.
Yeah, we always love to see every single Arsenal player, do well. And I love when we look at players like this rather than just focusing on, because it's not just about obviously our Lionesses, it's about everybody who plays in these fixtures. I think obviously Laura Viin got such good reception when she returned, and she has every time she's played, every time she touched the ball in that final game of the season. I think fans were like, we know what kind of player she is and what she's going to bring, and I really hope now she gets that opportunity to sort of grow and develop. And I think before injury as well, she was sort of pushing to be such a good player for us. And obviously, we know what Maanum can bring. I think potentially an underrated player in general, but you just want them to succeed, don't you? And you want them to do well, unless it's against England. No, I'm joking. But yeah, definitely, I just think the more players that we can have doing well, the more positive news we can focus on that, obviously, rather than looking at the negatives, players' injuries, not getting the results and obviously, things like that. So yeah, always a positive and really great to see and hear about that.
Manu Zinsberger played well by all accounts in the first game and then left the squad for the second. We can only presume that's, probably timed with her wife who's pregnant at the moment. And we wish those two all the best, of course.
Absolutely.
We've got an exciting time. And then finally, the Emma Hayes era starting over in the USA. A lot happened in the USA. Emma Hayes taken over. And even I've been watching the Cricket World Cup and there's been cricket in New York. So it's all quite surreal. Emma Hayes in cricket in the USA at the moment. But a good start for the former Chelsea boss. 4-0 and a 3-0 win over South Korea. Emily Fox featuring in both. I think she'll be rotated in and out of that side a fair bit. Fox, be interesting to see how she works under Emma Hayes.
Yeah, I think so, and I don't think we need to jump to conclusions, do we, that she's being brought off. I think that's very, you know, actually maybe a positive thing at times because, like we've said, I'm not going to keep repeating, but the amount of football played, obviously Emma Hayes is probably managing that as well as managing sort of
Yeah.
her squad and figuring out sort of where everybody fits into that. Obviously, it's difficult as an Arsenal fan to sit here and say, well done, Emma Hayes, because that's never going to really happen, is it? But
We'll fill it
yeah,
after
we can
time or
maybe
we're
we could
never going to get over it.
yeah, maybe we could move on from that one day, but that day is not today. So, let's talk about the players, obviously, and yeah, no, to be honest, look, it's a positive start, isn't it, for her? And obviously, we want Emily Fox to do well in general,
Yeah.
even if we don't like the manager, the team, whatever that may be. I reiterate that point. Arsenal players doing well is always going to be a positive to me, and I really like, the young players doing well and succeeding in that side. I think that's a massive, shift for them as well. They've sort of looked like a whole different team, really, and that's something that they've struggled to do. They've struggled to adjust from that old generation to that new generation and sort of play really good football. And I think, if we're being honest, if there's any manager that can really help get the best out of those young prospects, it's Emma Hayes, isn't it?
Yeah, they've got a couple of friendlies, I think, next month, and then they're straight into the Olympics, which is obviously going to come with a lot of pressure. And then finally, for our international break, obviously these games for the US and Canada sort of happen in the middle of the night, so we often sort of miss them as fans. But Chloe Lacasse, a really good goal, going 1-on-1 with the keeper and scoring a 2-0 win over Mexico, coming off the bench. Another player who doesn't always start for Canada, and then she played 66 minutes in the following 1-1 draw. She's sort of a player of a point to prove. I think, especially with Caldente coming into Arsenal, she might struggle a little for minutes next season. But she is a really good player for Arsenal to have. She's still quite raw, and if she's adding more goals to her game, that can only be good news.
Yeah, definitely. And I think there's some who have looked at the maybe towards the end of the season and thought that Lacasse should have got more opportunities. Obviously there's others that maybe thought that she should have done better with the opportunity she was given. I wanted to see a bit of consistency in terms of her being played for 2, 3 games at a time. I think she often just gets 20, 30 minutes at the end of the game. And, we look at her and we think, come on, Lacasse, please do something. But actually, that's not very fair, is it? We need to give her as the same opportunity that we've given others to have 90 minutes, to have 2, 3 games in a row. But in terms of impact player, if that's something that maybe we're going to consider next season and going forward, seeing her come off the bench and do that and sort of change the game in that way, that's something that maybe Jonas will be looking at and thinking, how can we get that out of Lacasse for Arsenal? How can she come
Hmm.
onto the pitch when we're maybe losing or we need a goal or we need a bit of something and she can actually change the game, and that's something that I really like to see when she plays for Canada, and hopefully we'll see that more for Arsenal, especially if we're looking at bringing in um a new, more consistent, potentially left winger or another addition to our starting 11.
That's a really good point, and that's always the case with the international break. You get to see sort of players playing obviously in different positions, different formations, and how they're used under various managers, which is always really interesting. And Jonas Eidevall would have had a keen eye over all of it. We'll briefly touch on my piece, I guess. I wrote a piece called "Closing the Gap: How Arsenal Women Can Compete for the WSL Title." In 2024-25, after an inconsistent season. I've sort of skipped the Conti Cup, the Champions League. I just wanted to focus on the league, if you like. And it almost became quite negative, the piece. I tried to balance it out, but I guess that shows a team like Arsenal, they have to be competing higher for the WSL. I almost started by saying we've had 2 seasons in a row where we've been at Meadow Park on the final day and the title's been decided elsewhere. And we simply can't have that again next season. Just wanted to get your thoughts. I don't know if you've read the piece and had a look through.
Yeah, I have. Yeah, an absolutely great piece, and exactly you've kind of touched on everything that we've touched on, that I've heard the Arsenal fans touch on, and that's kind of the reception that I thought you got for the piece. Many people saying, pretty much amen to that, because that's exactly what we've been feeling. We've looked at this team, we've looked at this squad, we've developed it, we've had, great additions to the squad, and we should be achieving more, especially if we're considering, like you touched on, the league. Next season, I think at a bare minimum, we have to be pushing for the league title. We can't feel at any point like what happened this season can happen again. We were going into games this season when we've lost and looking at it and thinking it's over already, and I don't think we can have that again next season. We kind of want a Manchester City Chelsea situation, except we're in there and we're pushing and we're potentially the one that comes out on top, and that's, if we look at other tournaments as well, potentially we'll be considering getting to Wembley in an FA Cup. But in terms of most fans, I think most of them would be saying actually it's that league title, charge that we need to be putting on next season. And that's kind of what you touched on brilliantly in your piece as well.
Yeah, that's up on the Gooner Fanzine website. If you haven't had a read, we'll have plenty more season preview content to come. We'll have another international roundup, of course, next month. I think the international break again is badly scheduled because I think it just about overlaps with the start of the men's Euros, which is another bad bit of scheduling by UEFA because I'm absolutely buzzing for the Euros now, and there's obviously going to be more football to write about and cover at that time. Daisy, good to chat as always. Glad you enjoyed your night in Newcastle. Did you have a proper night on the Toon after, by the way, or was it a quiet one?
No, I didn't. I think that maybe the result sort of swayed me, either go left and go home or go right and go in and have a few drinks. But yeah, great night. Obviously, yeah, great performance in the second game. And always great to see the Lionesses win, and obviously see other Arsenal players do well in other games. So yeah, thanks for having me again. Yeah, and a really, really good show.